Good afternoon. As mentioned at the beginning of today, we have several events that we have Best Wednesday Ever. We have 3 events all happening in one room. Oh, hey. Sorry, I get the teleprompter. It's very nice. My name is Tanya Matthews. I am acting chair of the National Assessment Governing Board, and I have the responsibility for opening up our second event for the afternoon. The second event this afternoon are remarks from the Secretary of Education. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary of Education of the United States, Betsy DeVos.
Well, thank you, Tanya, for that kind introduction and for your service as acting chair. And thank you to all our National Assessment Governing Board members for maintaining our national yardstick of student achievement. Since 1992, the nation's report card has provided a comprehensive view of the state of American education. It shows us where our students are and where they should go. It gives America's parents, her teachers, and her leaders a detailed picture of student achievement, or in all too many cases, a lack thereof. Today, the report card will be opened by moms and dads across America. And it pains me to say they're not going to like what they see. The numbers are reason for deep concern. The bottom line is this: this country has a student achievement crisis. And this is not new. For more than 3 decades, I and many others have said that America's antiquated approach to education fails too many kids. I've seen firsthand the frustration of an 8th grade child as he struggled to read and comprehend a 3rd grade book. I share in the anger of a mom who can't afford a move to the better school district for her daughter who can't do math. But don't blame them. Blame the experts who assure us each year that American education's doing okay, that our schools are good enough. If you just look at the numbers hard enough, they say, you'll see some improvement in some subject for some students somewhere. And that might be true, but they've missed the forest for the trees. We all heard Dr. Carr's presentation. Our nation's report card shows that 2/3 of American students can't read at grade level. 2 out of 3. And only Mississippi and DC saw improvement this year. Today's report card is essentially the same as the last one, and the one before that, and the one before that. In fact, student achievement hasn't changed much since 1992. I invite you to look at the slide. Flat lines, barely any change. Now, I know some will say, wait, there was some improvement in math in the 1990s. Well, that was a quarter century ago. And even today, we have some have said we have dramatically narrowed the achievement gap. That is flat out not true. In reality, scores have not improved enough. Achievement has not improved enough. And our children continue to fall further and further behind their international peers. In fact, too many American students who were already low achieving are worse off today, while our best performing students have plateaued. Those near the bottom, our most vulnerable, have fallen even farther behind. 34% of our nation's 4th graders are what the report card calls below basic readers. Appallingly, nearly half of 4th graders who qualify for free and reduced lunch are below basic. But let's be honest about what below basic really is. They can't read, and their scores are getting worse. In case you're missing the obvious, that, my friends, is the headline. Altogether, 4th grade reading declined in 17 states, and 8th grade reading declined in 31 states. If we look closer into our nation's cities, we see an even more disturbing picture. America's education system is failing entire communities. Recently, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania had to take control of Harrisburg schools for the third time because 90% of the students in the city weren't proficient in any core subject. And yet the superintendent who oversaw this widespread failure received a raise and a $5,000 bonus. A similar story unfolded in Providence, Rhode Island, where schools were also recently taken over by state government. A new assessment there revealed that 80% of students weren't proficient in reading and language arts. A devastating report from Johns Hopkins uncovered rampant problems with student discipline, bad teachers, and with a hapless, bloated bureaucracy. Now, thanks to a state commissioner's order, parents and students will be intimately involved in developing a new plan for Providence. We hope they will be bold in doing what's right for students. And then there's Detroit. The city's academic struggles are infamous. Faced with the Motor City's bankruptcy and consistently poor student achievement, the state government has been obliged to intervene and take control not once, but twice. Still today, more than 90% of Detroit's community schools' 8th graders cannot read at grade level. Things have gotten so bad there that students and families are suing for a right to read. America's students should not have to sue their way to literacy, to learning. And there is no excuse for any of this. America's educators know what it takes to teach a student to read. They know students need the basics, phonics. They just aren't given the freedom to teach it. Children suffer as a result. And somehow they're expected to go on grade to grade without the most essential skill. Now, these are just some of the numbers, but behind the statistics are real consequences for real people. Behind every data point is a young man or a young woman with dreams, with aspirations, abilities, with potential and purpose. Think about the mom or dad who cannot read and so does not read to their own children at bedtime. Think about what that portends for their lifelong learning journeys. Think about what it means if they're passed along grade to grade, not reading as they should. Think about the father whose son, a recent high school graduate, was honored in the local newspaper. Dad's pride turning to disappointment after he discovered his son couldn't read or comprehend the article. So Dad marches over to the high school principal's office with his son and newspaper in tow and asks his son to read the article to the principal. He, of course, can't. Then the father pointedly asks the principal how he could have graduated his son or anyone who can't read. I also think of my recent visit to an Indianapolis prison. The warden told me the biggest problem there is not violence or discipline, it's illiteracy. These are very real consequences that have followed year after year of more spending on more of the same. Over the past 30 years, per pupil spending has skyrocketed. A massive increase in spending to buy flatlined achievement. It just doesn't add up. So where does the money go? Here's a dirty little secret. Highly paid administrators, coordinators, consultants, assistant principals, assistant superintendents, layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. Since 1950, the growth in non-instructional school staff has increased 7 times faster than the student enrollment growth. If staff levels matched student enrollment, public schools across the country could have saved or reinvested around $35 billion additional dollars every year. Imagine what that could have meant in teacher compensation. Worse still, at the federal level alone, taxpayers have spent more than $1 trillion trying to fix K-12 education. Well, researchers at Harvard and Stanford recently studied the past half-century of that attempt, and they found that federal interventions thus far have been unable to dent the achievement gap. more than $1 trillion did nothing to shrink the gulf between high-achieving students and low-achieving ones. It's way past time we dispense with the idea that more money for school buildings buys better achievement for school students. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is, as we all know, Albert Einstein's definition of insanity. No amount of spending can bring about good results from bad policy. Now, some states have taken hard looks at what they've been doing, and some have decided to do something different. Take Mississippi. Students there are among the most improved in the nation today. Fourth graders scored the highest ever in the state's history. And Mississippi was one of only 2 jurisdictions that actually improved since the last nation's report card. But that's not because taxpayers spent more money on education. It's because Mississippi put a singular focus on student achievement, especially when it comes to literacy. The idea was simple. Students who can't read can't learn. And if a student can't read by 3rd grade, a student won't learn. So now all Mississippi's 3rd grade readers must demonstrate they can at least read at grade level before advancing to 4th grade. This year, we're beginning to see the results of that policy. Students in Mississippi are better readers than they were on the last report card and on the one before that. And the same is true for math. Now let's consider Florida. Students there outperformed nearly every other state, but the state's story wasn't always full of sunshine. Many there will remember when students only needed a 1.5 GPA to graduate high school. That was borne out in the state's ranking on the nation's report card. Florida consistently ranked among the lowest achieving states. Like everywhere else in the country, Florida's families were fed up with failure, sick of the status quo, and they demanded better. Doing better began with introducing education freedom. Public charter schools, tax credit scholarship programs, education savings accounts, vouchers. Students in Florida have more mechanisms for education freedom than anywhere else in the country. More keys to unlock opportunities, more ways to learn and grow. Importantly, doing better also meant improved achievement in traditional public schools. Transparency for parents, accountability for schools, flexibility for school leaders, respect for teachers with rewards for great ones, and a strong focus on literacy for all students. And today, Florida's students are doing better. The Sunshine State went from the bottom 10 to the top by nearly every measure. To the top 10 by nearly every measure. Today, dollars invested versus report card results, taxpayers in Florida get the best return on investment. More states and more communities could learn from Florida and Mississippi. More must face their failures, and they bear repeating. 2 out of 3 students aren't where they need to be. More states and more communities need to do something different. More states need to do what's right for kids. And they could if Washington would get out of the way, and by law it should. The U.S. Department of Education is 40 years old this year. When Congress created the department, it vowed the move would, and I quote, not increase the authority of the federal government over education, nor diminish the responsibility for education, which is reserved to the states, end quote. But Big Ed took over. More rules and more regulations, more staff and more standards, more spending and more strings. But as the numbers in today's report card reaffirm, students and teachers have gained precious little as a result. So let's have a serious conversation about the failure and future of the federal role in education. Government has never made anything better or cheaper, more effective or more efficient. And nowhere is that more true than in education. President Trump said that there's no failed policy more in need of urgent change than our government-run education monopoly. He is so right. It's time to try something new. We need to pivot to a policy of freedom. put improving student achievement in this country above all else, above any system, any mechanism, any building, and importantly, above politics. This philosophy is at the heart of the bipartisan K-12 law, the Every Student Succeeds Act. This law represents an important shift in America's approach to education policy. Unlike other education laws from administrations on both sides of the aisle, the successful passage of ESSA indicated that legislators in this town realized federal overreach in education had failed to achieve well-intentioned goals. Instead, the law affords states and communities more flexibility to address local challenges. For instance, states are required to test students annually, but ESSA invites each state to determine their standards and develop innovative assessments that focus on achievement and excellence. States can also set aside a certain percentage of federal taxpayer funding to use in new and creative ways. There's a student-centered funding pilot program for dollars to support students, not buildings. I like to picture kids with backpacks representing funding for their education following them wherever they go to learn. States should embrace the freedom in ESSA and look for ways to extend that freedom to empower teachers and parents and students themselves. And why not? Why not let decisions be made in states and in local districts? Why not make parents the primary decision makers when it comes to their child's education? Why not let every dollar flow to whomever is best able to help students read, write, do math, to learn? That is, after all, what our country is all about. The states, our laboratories of democracy, are empowered to address particular problems and possibilities of their particular people. That's by design. As James Madison, the father of our Constitution, explained, and I quote, "The powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite," end quote. Education is one of those powers, one of those responsibilities that was meant to be left to the states, to communities, to families. If we rediscover that founding principle, if we embrace education freedom, American students can achieve. American students can compete. American students will lead, and America will win. Thank you very much for your attention.
We want to thank the Secretary for making time in her very busy schedule to join this event and give comments. As the Secretary noted, every point counts, just as every student counts. And so our 14-point gains in fourth grade math over the last 30 years are as worthy of celebration as our single-point decline over 2 years in fourth grade reading. We must pay attention to all of this. She also shouted out my city. I am in Detroit. I love Detroit. Detroit is ever faithful. I am also at Wayne State University, and we just announced free college tuition for all Detroit students. And so if you look at the results, you may wonder, what are they thinking? I will tell you from my personal story that I am one of those high performers at the top, and my sister is one of those low performers at the bottom, and I get to say that out loud because the punchline is she finished her doctorate 3 years before I did, even though she started 2 years after. So there is something to be said about believing in our students and taking results like these in their full context and as the full call to arms that they are intended to be. As the daughter of a public school English teacher, hi Mom, I can tell you that the big picture is important. And as an engineer, I can tell you that anomalies should never be ignored, and they are worthy of investigating, and that context matters. Silver bullets are for werewolves. We humans will have to roll up our sleeves and try every means necessary, equitably and cleverly. As an educator, I am up for the challenge, and I invite and expect all of my parents and all of my politicians to join me. So this concludes, oh, thank you. So this concludes the second event in our afternoon and give us just 2 to 3 minutes bio and Twitter break, and make sure we are ready to continue the live stream and take live questions for our next event. Thank you.